When God is about to do something big in your life, one of the first signs you'll notice is that challenges seem to stack up, almost as if the universe is conspiring against you. Things that once felt simple and easy suddenly feel complicated, delayed, or outright impossible. You may even start to question whether you're on the right path. But I want to assure you, this is not a sign that you're failing. It's often the opposite. These challenges are not meant to stop you. They're meant to prepare you for what's coming next. Think about it. If God is going to trust you with something big, He's not going to hand it to you without making sure you're ready to handle it. He wants to see if you have the patience, the resilience, and the strength to carry the weight of the blessing He's about to give. And that's why the pressure often feels overwhelming just before the breakthrough. It's not because you're being abandoned or forgotten, it's because you're being refined. Have you ever noticed how diamonds are formed? They don't just appear out of nowhere shiny and perfect. They're created under intense heat and pressure. Without that process, they remain just ordinary lumps of carbon. In the same way, God uses challenges to transform you into someone capable of carrying the weight of the blessings He has prepared for you. The pressure isn't meant to crush you, it's meant to create something extraordinary within you. But here's the tricky part. When we face these challenges, it's easy to get discouraged. We start asking questions like, why is this happening to me? Or, God, if you're really with me, why am I struggling so much? Those are natural questions, but they come from a place of misunderstanding. The struggle isn't evidence of God's absence. It's evidence that He's working behind the scenes, setting you up for something greater than you can imagine. Let me tell you, some of the greatest blessings in my life came right after some of the hardest seasons. There were times when I wanted to give up, times when I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'll be honest, those moments were painful. But looking back, I realized they weren't wasted. Every challenge was a part of the process, and every delay had a purpose. I wasn't being punished. I was being prepared. You might be in a season right now where it feels like everything is falling apart. Maybe doors you thought were meant to open are slamming shut. Maybe the people you thought would always be there are walking away. Maybe you're doing everything right, and it still feels like nothing is working. If that's where you are, I want you to hear me loud and clear. Don't give up. Don't let frustration or fear convince you that your story is over, because the truth is, it's just getting started. Sometimes the biggest challenges come right before the biggest breakthroughs, because that's when the enemy tries the hardest to stop you. He knows you're on the verge of something significant, and he'll throw everything he can at you to make you doubt yourself, to make you doubt God, and to make you quit. But what he doesn't realize is that every time you push through, you're becoming stronger, wiser, and more prepared for what's ahead. In those moments of challenge, I want to encourage you to shift your perspective. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Start asking, what is this preparing me for? When you do that, you'll begin to see the challenges differently. You'll realize that every obstacle is an opportunity to grow. Every delay is a chance to build patience, and every difficulty is a stepping stone to something greater. One thing I've learned is that God often uses the things that seem like setbacks to set you up for your purpose. You might feel like you're stuck, but what if you're not stuck at all? What if God is just holding you in place for a moment because He's aligning everything you need for what's coming next? What if the delay isn't denial but protection? What if the struggle isn't punishment but preparation? I don't know what you're facing today, but I do know this. God doesn't waste anything. Not the tears, not the pain, not the waiting. It all has a purpose. And if you keep moving forward, if you keep trusting Him, you'll look back one day and realize that the challenges weren't there to break you. They were there to make you. So if you're feeling the weight of challenges pressing down on you, don't lose heart. Don't give up. Instead, stand firm in the knowledge that you're being prepared for something greater. Because when the challenges intensify, it's often a sign that God is about to move in a big way. And when He does, you'll see that every struggle was worth it. When God is about to give you something big, one of the clearest signs is that you begin to feel stretched beyond your limits. It's that unmistakable season when everything feels harder than it used to, as if the weight you're carrying has doubled overnight. Suddenly the things that once came easily demand more effort, more focus, and more energy than ever before. You might even find yourself asking, God, why does this feel so heavy? Why does it seem like I'm being pushed to my breaking point? But let me tell you something important. God doesn't stretch you to break you. He stretches you to prepare you for what's next. Think about it. If you want to grow stronger physically, you don't do that by staying comfortable. You lift heavier weights, you push your body further. And yes, you feel sore in the process. That soreness isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that your muscles are being strengthened. In the same way, when God stretches you, it's not because He wants to see you struggle. It's because He's equipping you with the capacity to handle the blessings He's about to pour into your life. Without that stretching, you wouldn't have the strength, the wisdom, or the character to sustain what's coming. But let's be honest, being stretched is uncomfortable. It challenges you in ways you didn't expect. You might feel the weight of responsibilities you didn't ask for. You might face situations that test your patience, your faith, and even your identity. And in those moments, it's tempting to want to shrink back to what feels safe and familiar. But let me tell you, the person you were yesterday isn't capable of walking into the future God has planned for you. That's why He stretches you. He's not just growing your capacity, He's transforming you into the person you need to be for the next season. Sometimes, the stretching process feels isolating. You might feel like nobody understands what you're going through, like you're carrying a burden that's too heavy to bear. And while it's easy to look around and compare yourself to others who seem to have it easier, remember this. God isn't measuring your growth against anyone else's. He's working with you on a plan that is uniquely designed for your life, your purpose, and your destiny. So while someone else's path might look smoother, it's not your path. And the challenges you're facing aren't punishment, they're preparation. I've seen it happen time and time again. People pray for growth, for success, for purpose, but when the stretching begins, they want to run the other way. Why? Because growth is hard. It demands more of you than you think you're capable of giving. But here's the beautiful part. God knows exactly how much you can handle. He knows your breaking point, and He's not going to push you past it. Instead, He's going to stretch you just enough to bring out what He's already placed inside of you. You see, there's greatness in you that you haven't even tapped into yet. There's strength you don't know you have, patience you've never had to use, and wisdom that's waiting to be unlocked. But those things don't come out when life is easy. They emerge when you're under pressure, when you're stretched, and when you're forced to rely on God in ways you never have before. And that's exactly where He wants you. In a position where your faith isn't in your own abilities, but in His power to carry you through. Think about David before he became king. He spent years in the wilderness, running for his life, living in caves and facing battles he never asked for. It wasn't the crown that made David a king, it was the stretching he went through in the process. God used every trial, every challenge, and every moment of discomfort to prepare him for the throne. And the same is true for you. God isn't stretching you to hurt you, He's stretching you to prepare you for the weight of your destiny. There will be moments when you feel like you can't take one more step, when you want to throw in the towel and say, God, this is too much. But let me remind you of something. God wouldn't bring you to this place if He didn't have a plan to bring you through it. He sees the bigger picture. He knows what's on the other side of this season, and He's using every moment of stretching to get you ready for it. So if you're feeling stretched right now, don't resist it, embrace it. Lean into the discomfort, knowing that it's not meant to destroy you, it's meant to grow you. Trust that God knows exactly what He's doing, and remember that He never wastes the pain of the process. What feels like too much today is building the strength you'll need for tomorrow. And when the blessing comes, you'll see that every moment of stretching was worth it. When God is about to give you something big, there's often a moment when you find yourself in a season of separation or isolation. At first, it might feel confusing or even painful. The people you thought would always be there start pulling away. Or maybe you're the one who feels the need to step back. Opportunities that seemed promising suddenly dry up. Doors that looked wide open are now firmly shut. And in the middle of it all, you might be wondering, God, what is happening? Why does it feel like I'm losing everything and everyone I thought I needed? But let me tell you something about God's plan. Sometimes separation is preparation. When God is getting ready to elevate you, He'll often remove the things and even the people that can't go with you to the next level? It's not because they're bad or unworthy. It's because their role in your life was only meant for a certain season, and that season has come to an end. God knows what's ahead, and He knows exactly who and what you need to fulfill your purpose. And sometimes that means He has to make room by removing what's no longer aligned with where you're going. I know that separation can feel lonely. It's not easy to watch friendships fade, relationships shift, or opportunities slip away. It's especially hard when you don't understand why it's happening. You might even start to question yourself, wondering if you did something wrong. But let me remind you of this. God's plan is always intentional. Even when it doesn't make sense, He's working for your good. He's not trying to punish you. He's positioning you. Think about it. Before a tree can grow taller, its roots have to go deeper. That process often happens in isolation, beneath the surface where no one can see. It's the same with you. Sometimes God has to pull you into a season of solitude so He can do a deeper work in you. He needs your attention, your focus, and your willingness to let go of what's familiar so He can prepare you for what's ahead. And while it might feel like you're being forgotten, you're actually being set apart. One of the hardest parts of this process is trusting God when the separation doesn't feel fair. Maybe you've lost people who were a big part of your life, and you don't understand why they had to leave. Or maybe you're being called to walk away from situations that once felt comfortable and secure. It's easy to hold on, to cling to what's familiar, because letting go feels too risky. But let me tell you something I've learned. When God asks you to let go, it's because He has something better in store. The sooner you release what's no longer meant for you, the sooner you can receive what He's preparing for you. I've seen this play out in my own life. There were seasons when I fought hard to hold on to relationships and opportunities that I thought were essential. But over time, I realized that those very things were holding me back from stepping into what God had for me. It wasn't until I let go fully and completely that I began to see the bigger picture. God wasn't taking something away from me. He was making space for something greater. Separation also has a way of sharpening your focus. When certain distractions are removed, you're forced to confront what really matters. You start to hear God's voice more clearly because there's less noise around you. And in that stillness, He begins to reveal things about yourself that you might not have noticed before. Maybe it's a strength you didn't realize you had, or a weakness He wants to refine. Maybe it's a calling you've been avoiding, or a lesson you need to learn before you can move forward. Whatever it is, that time of separation is critical to your growth. Even Jesus experienced this. Before He began His public ministry, He spent 40 days in the wilderness, completely alone. It was a time of testing, but it was also a time of preparation. When He emerged from that season, He was ready to fulfill His purpose. And the same is true for you. The wilderness might feel lonely, but it's where God does some of His most important work. It's where He equips you, strengthens you, and prepares you for what's coming next. So, if you're in a season of separation right now, don't despise it. Don't rush through it, or try to force your way back into the comfort of the familiar. Instead, lean into it. Trust that God knows what He's doing, even when it doesn't make sense. Trust that He's not taking things away from you to hurt you. He's doing it to help you grow. Because here's the truth. Not everyone can go where God is taking you. Not everything that worked in your last season will work in your next one, and that's okay. God is making room in your life for something bigger, something better, and something more aligned with His plan for you. So embrace the separation, knowing that it's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of something extraordinary. When God is about to give you something big, one of the most remarkable signs is an unexplainable peace that settles over you, even in the middle of chaos. It's not the kind of peace that comes from everything going perfectly or from knowing every detail of what's ahead. It's deeper than that. It's a peace that doesn't make sense, a calm in your spirit that contradicts the storms swirling around you. And when you feel it, you know it's not something you created on your own. It's God's way of reassuring you that He's in control. This peace is not tied to your circumstances. In fact, it often shows up when everything around you feels out of control. You might be facing challenges that seem impossible to overcome, hearing voices of doubt from every direction, or walking through a season of uncertainty where the path ahead isn't clear. And yet, in the middle of all that noise, there's a stillness in your heart that whispers, "It's going to be okay. I've got you." That's God speaking. That's him letting you know that he hasn't left you, that he's walking with you, and that what's coming is greater than what you're going through right now. But let's be honest, sometimes we get so focused on the chaos that we overlook the peace. We spend our energy worrying about what might go wrong, trying to figure everything out on our own, or battling thoughts that tell us we're not enough. And in doing so, we miss the gentle assurance that God is already handling what we can't. That's why it's so important to tune in to his voice, to quiet the noise in your mind, and to lean into the peace he's offering you. This kind of peace doesn't mean you won't have moments of doubt or fear. You're human, and it's natural to feel overwhelmed when life gets hard. But what makes this peace so powerful is that it coexists with the challenges. You can still feel the weight of what you're carrying, but you'll notice that it no longer crushes you. You can still see the storm, but you'll realize it doesn't scare you the way it used to. That's because God's peace isn't about removing the chaos, it's about giving you the strength to stand firm in the middle of it. I've experienced this kind of peace firsthand. There have been times in my life when everything felt like it was falling apart. Times when I didn't have the answers, when I didn't know how things were going to work out. But in those moments, when I chose to surrender my worries to God, something shifted. It wasn't that the situation changed right away, the storm was still there, but my perspective changed. Instead of focusing on what I couldn't control, I focused on the one who could, and that's when the peace came. You might be wondering, how do I find that kind of peace? The truth is, it's not something you find, it's something you receive. God freely gives it to those who trust him. But trust doesn't mean having all the answers. Trust means being willing to let go of the need to figure everything out and believing that God's plan is better than anything you could come up with on your own. It means saying, God, I don't know what's next, but I trust that you do. I don't know how this will work out, but I believe that you're working it out for my good. This peace is also a sign that God is preparing you for something greater. When you're on the verge of a breakthrough, the enemy will try to distract you with fear, doubt, and anxiety. He wants you to believe that you're not ready, that you're not capable, and that what God has for you is out of reach. But God's peace is stronger than any lie the enemy can throw at you. It's his way of reminding you that the battle isn't yours to fight, it's his. And if God is fighting for you, victory is already assured. Sometimes people around you won't understand the peace you have. They might question why you're not panicking, why you're not worried, or why you're still holding on to hope when things look so uncertain. That's because the peace of God doesn't operate on human logic. It surpasses all understanding. And that's why it's so powerful. It's not based on what's happening around you. It's based on who God is. He's faithful, he's constant, and he's working all things together for your good, even when you can't see it yet. So, if you're in a season where everything feels uncertain, where the storm is raging, and where the path ahead looks unclear, I want to encourage you to lean into God's peace. Don't let the chaos distract you from the quiet assurance that he's already gone ahead of you, making a way where there seems to be no way. And when that peace comes, and it will, hold on to it. Let it remind you that you're not alone, that you're not forgotten, and that God is about to do something extraordinary in your life. When God is about to give you something big, you'll often find yourself facing opposition that feels stronger and louder than anything you've experienced before. It's almost as if the enemy knows what's coming, and he throws everything he has at you to make you doubt, to make you quit, or to make you turn back before the breakthrough arrives. And in those moments, it's easy to question why things seem to get harder just when you're stepping closer to what you've been praying for. But here's the truth. The presence of opposition is often the clearest sign that you're on the verge of something extraordinary. Opposition doesn't show up to stop something small. It comes to challenge what's significant, what's life-changing, and what's destined to impact more than just you. The bigger the blessing, the greater the opposition. That's why, when God is about to move in a powerful way in your life, you can almost count on the enemy trying to distract, discourage, and derail you. But here's what I want you to understand. The enemy wouldn't be fighting so hard if he didn't already know that victory belongs to you. The fight you're experiencing isn't a sign of defeat. It's proof that you're stepping into God's purpose for your life. Think about it. Before David stepped onto the battlefield to face Goliath, there were voices of opposition all around him. His own brothers doubted him, questioning his abilities and his motives. King Saul told him he wasn't strong enough or experienced enough to win the fight. And then, of course, there was Goliath himself, standing there, taunting him, trying to intimidate him into backing down. But David didn't let the opposition shake him. He didn't focus on the size of the giant in front of him. He focused on the size of the God within him. And because of that, he walked into that battle with confidence, knowing that God had already secured the victory. That's the kind of mindset you have to carry when you face opposition. It's not about pretending the challenges don't exist or ignoring the difficulty of what you're up against. It's about choosing to trust that God's power is greater than anything that comes against you. It's about reminding yourself that if God has called you to something, no amount of opposition can stop you from stepping into it. The enemy might try, but he doesn't have the final say. God does. Sometimes, the opposition doesn't just come from external circumstances, it comes from within. You might find yourself battling thoughts of doubt, fear, and insecurity. The enemy loves to plant those seeds in your mind because he knows that if he can make you question yourself, you're more likely to give up. He'll whisper things like, "You're not ready for this," or "What if you fail?" or "Why would God choose you for something this big?" And if you're not careful, you'll start to believe those lies. But let me remind you of something. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. If He's leading you towards something, it's because He's already equipped you with everything you need to succeed. You see, opposition is not just a test of your strength, it's a test of your faith. It's an opportunity to decide whether you're going to believe in the size of your problems or the size of your God. And every time you choose faith over fear, trust over doubt, and perseverance over quitting, you grow stronger. You learn to rely on God in ways you never have before. And in that process, He prepares you not just to receive the blessing, but to sustain it. There's another important thing to remember about opposition. It often shows up right before the breakthrough. That's because the enemy knows he's running out of time. He knows that once you step into what God has for you, there's nothing he can do to stop it. So he fights harder, hoping to wear you down before you reach the finish line. But you can't let him win. You've come too far, fought too many battles, and trusted God through too much to turn back now. The opposition might be intense, but it's temporary, and on the other side of it is a blessing that's bigger than anything you could imagine. When you face opposition, don't let it intimidate you. Let it motivate you. Let it remind you that you're not fighting this battle alone. God is with you, fighting for you, and equipping you with everything you need to overcome. The same God who brought you through every challenge in the past is the God who will bring you through this one. And when you look back, you'll see that every moment of opposition was part of the process that prepared you for the blessing. So if you're facing resistance right now, don't let it make you doubt what God is doing. Let it confirm that you're right where you're supposed to be. Let it strengthen your faith, deepen your trust, and remind you that the greater the opposition, the greater the reward. Because when God is about to give you something big, no amount of opposition can stop what He has already ordained for your life. Keep moving forward, keep trusting, and keep believing. Your breakthrough is closer than you think. When God is about to give you something big, there's a sense of divine timing that begins to unfold in your life. It's not something you can rush, force, or manipulate. It's God's timing. And when it happens, everything starts aligning in ways that go beyond what you could ever orchestrate on your own. But here's the challenge. Divine timing requires patience, trust, and a willingness to wait on God, even when you don't understand the delays. We live in a world that values speed and instant results. We want answers now, blessings now, breakthroughs now, but God doesn't operate on our timelines. His plan isn't dictated by our schedules, and His purpose isn't bound by our deadlines. God knows exactly when the right time is, and He's never too early or too late. Yet, from our perspective, the waiting can feel excruciating. We start to wonder, God, did you forget about me? Did I miss the opportunity? Why is this taking so long? What we have to understand is that waiting is never wasted. In fact, the waiting period is often where God does His greatest work in us. It's in the waiting that He builds our character, stretches our faith, and teaches us to rely on Him completely. If He gave us everything we wanted the moment we asked for it, we wouldn't be ready to handle it. The weight of a big blessing requires a strong foundation, and that foundation is built during the waiting. Sometimes, While you're waiting, it might seem like nothing is happening. You've prayed, you've prepared, and you've positioned yourself, but the breakthrough hasn't come yet. Let me tell you something. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean God isn't working. Behind the scenes, He's aligning people, opportunities, and circumstances to bring His plan to pass. He's preparing not just the blessing for you, but also you for the blessing. And when everything is ready, it will come together in a way that only He could make happen. Think about Joseph. He had a dream from God, a vision of something big that was going to happen in his life. But before he saw that dream fulfilled, he went through years of waiting, hardship, and challenge. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. From the outside, it looked like his life was moving further and further away from the promise. But what Joseph couldn't see at the time was that every setback was a setup for the dream God had placed in his heart. Each step of the journey was preparing him for the moment when he would step into his destiny. And when that moment came, it happened quickly. In a single day, Joseph went from the prison to the palace because God's timing had arrived. That's how divine timing works. It may feel slow, but when it happens, it's sudden. One day you're waiting, and the next day, the door opens. One moment you're praying for the breakthrough, and the next moment, you're living in it. And when it happens, you'll look back and realize that God's timing was perfect all along. You'll see how He used every delay, every detour, and every disappointment to prepare you for the blessing He had in store. But here's the key. While you're waiting, you have to keep moving in faith. Waiting doesn't mean sitting back and doing nothing. It means staying faithful in the small things, even when the big thing hasn't happened yet. It means continuing to trust God, even when the timeline doesn't make sense. It means praising Him in the waiting, knowing that His plan is unfolding exactly as it should. Sometimes God will give you small glimpses of what's to come, little confirmations that you're on the right track. It might be a door that cracks open or an opportunity that seems to align with what He's promised. These moments are His way of reminding you to stay encouraged, to keep believing, and to keep trusting. They're like signposts along the journey, pointing you toward the destination He's prepared for you. And when the timing is right, there's no force on earth that can stop what God has for you. No delay, no opposition, no obstacle can stand in the way of His plan. What He has promised will come to pass, and it will come to pass at the exact moment it's meant to. That's why you can rest in the waiting. That's why you don't have to worry or stress about how it's all going to work out, because if God said it, He will do it. So if you find yourself in a season of waiting, don't lose heart. Don't let frustration or impatience steal your joy. Trust that God's timing is perfect and that He's preparing something far greater than you could ever imagine. Stay faithful, stay focused, and stay expectant, because when the time comes, it will all make sense, and you'll see that the wait was worth it.